Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. Have you ever stopped to think about why so many folks are not happy in their job, or they're not happy in the jobs at your company? Maybe you haven't been happy in your job now or in the past. Well, my guest today is trying to crack the code on this issue because it's a big issue. And his name is Jamie Schneiderman. And Jamie started a business called Career Spark, which is really focused on finding the right match between the individual and not just the company, but the specific role, using data, using science, as opposed to using gut feel and just a resume of what the person has done in the past, which is how most of us do it today. And he comes from a place where he believes that job performance really depend upon the person working in the role that they're built to succeed in. So if you can get that match right, you get much better performance from your team. Jamie spent time at Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, some of the best companies in the world, went to Harvard MBA. All that great stuff doesn't matter if you don't have the right fit. So for the next bit, we're going to talk with Jamie about how to find it at your company. Jamie, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you, Jeff?
Terrific. It's great to have you on the show. Maybe just give 60 seconds overview of what led you to your interest in this topic.
Sure. Well, it was a personal experience, right? I spent the first half of my career frustrated. You know, you sort of shared with everyone all the places that I've worked, and they sound fantastic on paper, but they weren't the right ones for me. Mm-hmm. And so, that frustration led me to feeling like there was a better place for me. And it turns out when I talked to other people, it became really clear that I wasn't alone, and that a ton of people felt the same way. And so it was really a question of, well, if this is a problem for so many people, and work is so important, right? We spend more time working than doing anything else. Why haven't we figured that out yet? Why have we found the solution to the problem?
It's such a common problem. So you really suffered from this yourself. Before we get to the solution, let's talk about this concept of using data and science to find the right match between the person and the position. Give us some examples of information or data points that people use today that are not very predictive, and then in contrast, some that are very predictive of success.
For sure. Well, I mean, a great example of something that is very poor from a predictability perspective is education, and whether or not someone has a degree. If you look at recruiting departments all over the place, they're always asking people, they're always putting it out there. Yeah. And the reason that they're putting it out there isn't because there's any correlation between that information and whether someone will be successful in the job. What it does is it acts as a screen. How do I filter the large volume of people coming at me?
I've got 500 resumes or candidates. What is a quick way to screen it down to 200? I'll look for a 4-degree education.
Yeah, exactly. And so you end up in a situation where you're being asked for stuff and you have to check boxes. And the problem is that the perfect candidate may have all the really important things and not have that one thing, which really isn't at all correlated to success in the job. So that's a pretty typical. So that one is pretty typical in terms of what doesn't work. What is a much better indicator of success or whether you can succeed in the job? I mean, in some cases, there are things like skills. Do you have the skills to do the job? So I think that's a given, but in some jobs, that's more important than others, right? So if you're a software developer, you got to be able to write code. I can tell you right now, if you're in customer service, your past experience, your skills, they matter much less. And then it gets into a whole different view of people, which is, who are they?
Got it.
What's their makeup?
What's their makeup? What's their DNA? The stuff that's hardwired at a very early age in life. So you present a very compelling argument for our listeners to focus on things that are predictive versus things that aren't predictive. Now the question becomes, how do we get at it?
Yeah.
Is this filling out a form? Is this putting them in front of a psychologist for an hour? How do you get at that DNA and the other things that you're describing that are predictive?
Yeah. So first of all, so when we start talking about this, there's a lot of the data that we're talking about on the what side, right? The skills, experience, education, all that stuff already exists, right? So that it exists somewhere. Well, one's resume in HRIS, whatever you want. So that exists. The other part around the DNA piece, as you mentioned, for us comes from psychometrics, and so what we're using is normative psychometrics. But I think the problem again in the psychometric world has been it's a different test for every different job. And those tests are long. And so it becomes an impractical exercise. It doesn't scale. You can't really look at people that way. Without jumping into what we do too much, but at least thinking about this, we sort of reverse engineered the way we think about that problem, right? Which is, how do you not think about testing for a job, but instead think about testing for the person? Who is this person? What makes them tick? And if you have a very good picture of what makes them tick from a work perspective, you can now create a profile on them. So you get both your who and your what.
But just because I know what makes them tick or what they enjoy doing, how do I bridge that to what they are good at doing? I mean, there's a lot of things I enjoy doing. I like singing, but you don't hear me singing. So how do you make that connection?
Well, okay. And so look, inherently in psychometrics, when you're starting to look at, personality and motivation, the premise is that you're looking at things that people like doing, they prefer to do. Taking it to a job, in a day-to-day job, think about you have a job. Everyone who's listening has a job that they're doing. There's things that we all like to do, and there's things that we don't like to do within our job. The things we like to do, probably, we spend a lot of time, the time zips by, you don't really think about it. You get into something you don't like to do, you put it off, you procrastinate, it takes much longer, it's painful. And so what we're actually doing is measuring those things about people and saying, what do you like to do? What do you not like to do? And so the idea is, if you know that about a person, now what we can do is we can also create benchmarks for what of those components exist within different jobs, right? By using the top performing people who are doing those jobs today.
Right. So you're kind of back testing, basically, right?
Yeah.
And are there certain jobs that this concept works for and others that it just doesn't, for whatever reason, maybe creative roles or artist roles or whatever?
No, the premise actually works consistently well across all jobs. The one place we've tended to stay away from are that one-off senior executive or the one person in a company. And the reason for that is it's harder to benchmark what that success looks like. It's going to vary dramatically. But if you start getting into sales departments or customer service departments or development teams, et cetera, like all those kind of things, like, you have people who are outperforming others. And so there's a reason why. If you could actually figure out why, you can use it for that reason. It
works well when you've got data points of multiple people in the role so that you can identify what are the common themes amongst the top performers. So I'm guessing salespeople, customer service, et cetera.
So those types of roles are great. We will, in healthcare, you're going to get a lot of people who are connecting a lot with the individual, right, with the patient. And so those situations. Look, data points matter. We've built up a lot of data points over time. So at times we have created benchmarks that are sort of genericized benchmarks for a role or for an industry. But always the preferable way to do this is using people who are incumbents in that role today in that company, because it doesn't just factor in what success looks like. It also factors in the culture and all the other variables associated with that job in that company.
As you do that benchmarking of your current team today, I can easily envision how I could, profile, let's use sales reps. Right. So I know who my top performers are, who the bottom performers are. I've got the numbers. It's very quantified. There's no place to hide. What I don't understand quite is, how do you profile or understand who's the best match on the culture piece, on the DNA piece?
Well, and so actually what we do is this. We actually say, who are the people? It's a simple question, which is, who are the people who are performing best in this role? in your environment, like in your company. So take your sales example. Who are your top performing sales reps? Okay, your top performing sales reps are the following, let's say 10 people, and you've got a whole bunch of people who are average and a bunch of people who are bottom. What is it about those 10 people that's different? And so essentially what we're doing is capturing what it is that's different about those people, which will include cultural elements, right? So it will include the factors around who they are, their DNA, if you like, that allows them to be successful both in the role and in the culture. So
I see.
we're working backwards. As opposed to, again, if we had done it the other way, we would have opinion about it. What we're doing in this case is we're using data around who people are who are already performing, and then coming back based on that and telling you why.
Got it.
This is why these people are performing well.
So the concept makes all the sense in the world. What data can you share with listeners about evidence that it actually works in the real world and beyond just the theory?
Yeah, no, of course. And I think that's the most important thing, right? So, first of all, people are the biggest expense item for almost every company, right? And what we don't realize is how much money we're wasting from a process perspective, from a turnover perspective, from a bad hire, lower performer. Your sales example is a great one. So what we've tended to see are things like significant process improvements, especially within the hiring process, but the big and shrinking time to hire. I think that the big areas for me that are most important are, how do I get happier, more engaged employees that stick around longer? And so, we've seen drops in turnover, like in the first year, of 30%. So significant drops in turnover in organizations, depending on the organization and the role. And then we've seen, and where you really get impact, and you use sales as an example, if we could get, 20% more top performing sales reps and then eliminate, and is it sort of to replace 20% bottom performing sales reps, wow, the impact on the business is huge. So we've seen massive change happen on the turnover side, as I mentioned, but also big boost in performance. Look, at the end of the day, we don't realize how much money is being wasted on people. We sort of accepted a level of failure here as society, and I don't think we should, because that inefficiency is gigantic.
To play devil's advocate, how do you know that the people that turnover reduction was a good thing or a bad thing? In other words, how do you know that the wrong people were exited and the right people stayed?
Well, no, I look, it's a fair question. At the end of the day, when we're looking at people, we're working closely with companies, right? So I'm quoting you high level numbers in terms of outcomes, but at the end of the day, really what we're trying to do is work with customers to say, how do we move the needle on your business? If we're not delivering an ROI, then there's no reason that they should be working with us, right? Sure. They should get rid of us right away. And so ultimately, first things first, we're doing that. Now, the other piece I think that's important here is our system is created with a loop, right? Like a closed loop. So it's a learning, that's a feedback loop. So what's happening is, as these things happen, as we incorporate this information, this data into the system, as they make decisions on it, we learn from the good decisions and make it better from the other decisions, right? It's constantly getting smarter and better the longer it goes. And so it continuously delivers ROI. I think that's the other important thing. It's not just about ROI year one. It's about ongoing ROI in your business to keep moving it forward.
Where can this be abused or misread, or the scientific concept behind it incorrectly applied? Give us an example of where, despite good intentions, it was just botched.
Well, no, and look, I think the biggest issue that you would have is that you take it and use it as the sole decision point, right?
It's an input.
It's an input. Like, listen, these are people. You're making people decisions, right? One of the things we're always clear about when we're talking to clients is, these are your decisions. It's your business, right? We're not telling you what to do, but what we're doing is equipping people with better information that they've never seen before to improve that decision making. Where the mistake is made is someone says, well, it's this person, this score is higher than this score, so therefore this person is better. Well, it's not. It's definitely an indicator, and it's definitely going to help you, but that's too black and white, and that's not the way this information should be used at all.
In that case, how do you know how much weight to place on it, right? I understand what you're saying, that you can't use it as the sole, our arbitrator of the decision. But then if you say it's one input and the person should still make the decision, that subjectivity is going to creep in again, or the bad data.
Yeah, so fair enough. But I think what's happening today is, so take a process like hiring, right? Subjectivity and opinion and bias enters the process right from the very beginning, right? You have a stack of resumes. Where do I even start? How do I even know who to sift it through? Where our system would help in that context is right away we are rating and ranking everybody. So everyone gets ranked in order based on most likely to succeed to least likely to succeed. And then within each one of them, there's information that's provided to dig deeper. So what's happening is you start at sort of the top of the list, which is a higher probability. But at the end of the day, they have to make the decision about, I want this person or don't want this person. And they should meet them and interview them, of course, right?
Yep. Got it. What types of companies are you working with that use this? Does it work better for large companies, startups, any particular sector?
Yeah, so it's definitely, look, it could work for anybody, but the reality is we typically work with companies with 1,000 or more employees. And the reason for that is large. So our, we start sort of at 1,000. Our biggest customers have hundreds of thousands of employees. And the reason for that is they have lots of employees. They have lots of challenges with those employees, of course, but they've also got systems and structures in place. So at this point, what they're really doing is saying, how do I use information to make better decisions, as opposed to, I don't even have the processes in place. I don't even know what's going on at all. And therefore, that they've, a smaller organization that doesn't have that in place is just less, they're just not as likely to get as much value out of the system as someone who's a little bit bigger.
So there is a quantitative aspect that makes it more useful.
For sure.
Got it. And is this a subscription model where companies like subscribe and then profile all their jobs and then begin to profile candidates to find the match? Or how do you actually operationalize it? Yeah.
So we work on a subscription basis. So it's we do it on a flat fee, unlimited use. And one of the big issues that we've seen also in things like hiring is a pay per use model for every candidate. And that doesn't scale. Yeah. So what we've said is we kind of look at it on a subscription basis, mostly focused on the number of employees. And then companies will pay more or less depending on how many different of our modules they use. Like, are they using the career pathing, hiring, like which pieces? And then it's, we encourage them to use as much as possible because you're just going to get more out of it that way.
You mentioned career pathing. So before we wrap up, I actually want to drill into that for a second. How do you understand, or how does the technology apply such that we understand the person's strengths today, but then what kind of career path or ceiling they might hit down the road, and how I kind of get them on that path?
Yeah. So look, skills, experience, education is all about what you can do right now. But when you start looking at who somebody is, their DNA, what they're capable of, we can actually profile mid-level management leadership roles in an organization and then say, does this person profile like those people? Do they look like your leaders? Do they look like those, that more senior level, or just could they move to another function that you wouldn't have thought about based on what they look like on paper? And so all of those things allow us to at least see and direct people into places that we previously couldn't tell. And then you still have to identify what does the person need to develop and learn and work on the way there. Yeah. But at least you know where to send them. I feel like today people, it's funny, you have 14-year-olds who are making decisions about their entire lives just based on what school they go to and what they're taking. And
I have one of those.
Okay, well, there you and that's impossible. Yeah. So we can do a much better job of directing people down the right path or paths for them, and then equipping them with the things they need to then be successful in those paths.
Terrific. Jamie, this is fascinating. It's clearly the future of work, the future of recruiting, and the future of, hopefully, to your point, finding better retention amongst the people that we hire. How do people learn more about the business Career Spark and get in touch?
For sure. So the easiest way is we're at careerspark.com, careerspark.com. Or if it's easier, you can contact me directly, and I can either talk to you or pass you on to someone at our end. It's just Jamie at careerspark.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for making the time, Jamie.
Thanks, Jeff.